I was just talking to someone about joining him on his podcast to talk about story selling. And I mentioned that the subtitle of my book references the hero's journey of story selling. And I know when people think about telling stories, including for the purpose of sales for copywriting, there is this automatic association with like great storytelling, including the hero's journey, which is an incredible framework that's been used for popular stories, actually going back for thousands of years, but recently Hollywood has really embraced it, and most stories in Hollywood are told with some variation on the hero's journey. And yet, when it actually comes to copywriting, to persuasion, to selling, to marketing, you don't necessarily want to use the hero's journey. In fact, you might not even want to focus on the plot at all. And so I want to talk about that. You know, I told this guy, like, no, actually, I don't teach the hero's journey for story selling. I teach what I think is the story selling equivalent of the hero's journey. So we'll get into all that today. But let's take a little detour here, because I've actually been thinking a lot about Chris Haddad recently. I've been thinking a lot about Chris Haddad. No, sorry, not creepy like that. I've been thinking about the interview that I did with Chris on Breakthrough Marketing Secrets fairly recently. And he, very early on, it struck me when he said, my stories are not really about what happens at all. My stories are not really about what happens at all. And if you connect with Chris, if you study his work, he is known for this story-driven copywriting that's so emotionally wrenching. In fact, he's called it the pig method, the punch in the gut method for emotional copywriting. And yet, when we think about this, we do think about stories, but his point was that emotional storytelling for copywriters is not about the plot. It's not about the plot. So what is it about? It's about the other part of that, the emotion, the internal experience of the protagonist, the main character of the story, right? It's about the emotional experience and the emotional transformation. So the truth about plot in story selling, notably, you take away the plot from a movie and nobody's going to want to see it, but you take away a plot from a video sales letter or other selling story, well, it's going to actually make it more compelling, at least reduce the plot. Because story selling is about that internal experience, not the external details. There are some surface events that happen. that are the catalyst for the buying decision to take place, or whatever decision, the internal change that's required. So if we're going to make a decision, if we're going to be compelled to take action, if we're going to buy something, there has to be an internal change that takes place. And that internal change that takes place is from I want this thing, but I don't have a way to get it, to this opportunity is my way to get that thing that I want, right? And that's about the character. It's about the character going through that decision-making process, the character going through that journey. Oftentimes, there is a lot of emotional turmoil going on in good direct response promotions around that, right? But again, it's about that character, and it's about that character overcoming, right? It's about them overcoming a challenge. It's about overcoming a problem. It's about breaking through to the other side. It's about getting the solution that they thought was impossible. And we can amplify this by noting that we all believe that we are the underdog. We all believe that other people have it better than us. We all believe that the other team has advantages, right? That the other person has advantages. We all believe that everybody else is in a better situation than we are. And if we're going to succeed, it's about the underdog overcoming, right? And that's your prospect. That's who you're speaking to. They're feeling like, oh, the world is stacked against me. This problem is stacked against me. And I need to overcome it in order to get what I want. And if you can validate that feeling and then show them how as the underdog they can reign triumphant in the end, then great. That is what you need to do in your story selling. Now, my book, The Ultimate Selling Story, really I've taught this a few times. You can go deeper into it in my book, but it's built around this PISA formula, which I've taught often, but I want to revisit it from this perspective that the plot is irrelevant. So PISA is problem. We encounter a problem, we speak to the problem. The story can be told from the perspective of you or from a customer. It can be a case study. It can be your personal journey towards creating the product or service, right? But there is a problem that is encountered. And that is not so much an external problem as an internal experience of a problem. The external situation is interpreted as a problem internally, subjectively, emotionally by the prospect. But then as soon as it's interpreted as a problem, there is this gap that's created between the problem and the solution. And I want the solution to my problem. And there is emotional turmoil that comes from desiring a solution that I don't have, that I'm not able to get immediately. And so we dig into the emotional agitation around this. What is it like to have the problem? What's it like to have the symptoms of the problem? What's it like for the problem to be unsolved? What's it like to not know if there is a solution or what a good solution is, right? And so we explore the emotional agitation. This is all internal. Like, this is not plot going on the outside as we traditionally think of it. This is the internal process that we go through. Okay, there's this problem and it sucks to have the problem and I really want to overcome the problem. And then we run into invalidation. There's a little bit in external plot here, right? We try some things and they don't work. We try some things and they don't work. They don't get us the solution that we desire. And that is the invalidation of other options, right? But the focus again here needs to be more on the trying and failing, which is an emotional experience, an emotional journey, more so than it is a external three-dimensional plot process, right? It's not necessarily a series of scenes. It's a series of frustrations that different things didn't work. And then an epiphany that an ideal solution needs to contain X, Y, Z, right? An ideal solution needs to do this. And that, again, is an internal experience, an emotional experience of an epiphany of the solution needs to do this, right? And your prospect, if they're coming along with you for this ultimate selling story, they're having the same realization as you speak it, right? I discovered this solution because what had been missing from everything else was this thing, right? And then the action that I took, and yes, that's external, right? But it's more about the implementing of the discovery. It's about the fulfillment of the initial desire. It's about overcoming that initial challenge. It's about the underdog becoming triumphant, right? The action that's taken externally is more about what that's the catalyst for internally, which is achievement, right? It's about achieving the goal. And so that's how I structure the ultimate selling story. That's how the best selling stories are structured, whether they do it intentionally or not. This can be done very quickly. It can be done in a very extended way. But in all cases, if you focus on the internal aspect of this, and the plot just functions as a catalyst for you to tell this story, the external events are a catalyst for the internal experience, then you're doing it right. And if you want to use stories to sell, number one, I just want to say that they work. Stories work. They're effective for sales messaging. I will also say that it's still a wildly valuable skill. And for those of you who have watched my recent content where I've talked about AI, the advances and limitations of AI, and maybe that fear that some of us are having about AI, it's hard for AI to replace this. Certainly for now, who knows for how long. But if I have a conversation with a client and I get a story out of them, it's hard for me to translate that into really effective copy with AI. And so this is just something that provides an ongoing advantage for the human copywriter for a while. And just remember here, if you want to use stories to sell, it's all about the internal experience. It is really not about the external plot points. It's about what's going on internally, emotionally, the realizations, the frustrations, the struggles, the overcoming, that sense of the underdog triumphant, right? That is what is going to lead to more conversions, more sales. So my call to action for you at the end of this episode is ask yourself how you can use this in your story selling going forward. Do you need to go back and edit some stuff? Do you need to plan your next promotion to lean into this a little bit more? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more content like this delivered to you. I'm including links in the description to get the Ultimate Selling Story book from Amazon. That is my book. That's the best place to get it. As well as to my interview with Chris Haddad, talking all about emotional copywriting, where that initial quote in this episode came from. I'm Roy Furr, this is Breakthrough Marketing Secrets, and I'll catch you again in the next episode. See you soon. Bye. Thank you once again for tuning in to this daily episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Remember, check out the links with this episode for even more value. Now make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and engage in every way you can to keep this show going and growing and delivering daily value to you. I'll catch you soon for your next big breakthrough.